into Retirement, an unusual podcast about finding purpose, meaning, and balance after a busy working life, with David Ailing Smith and Peter Taylor. Exploring the emotional, psychological, and practical realities of modern retirement through a series of reflective conversations undertaken whilst walking scenic routes across the UK.
Oh, well, this is nice, Daz.
It is a riverside walk, Peter. That's our
It is a riverside walk.
after the Thames. I know you don't like me doing the chronology wrong, but we have done Thames.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting start to this one because I inquired on the health and safety people who look after us, and they said we're today likely to be around 35 degrees centigrade, which is 95 Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
They said probably best you don't go for a walk.
Yeah.
So I suggested we just go to a pub instead, and then you turned up and you kidnapped me. You've taken me to Symonds Yat for a walk.
But it's shady though, isn't it?
It's shady where we are at the moment, yes.
Yeah, no,
and there wasn't much of a hill yet.
So we are on the River Wye, which you'll know, Peter, is the fourth longest river in the UK at 150 miles.
I didn't know that. The only thing I know about the River Wye is it bends a lot, and overlooking it is the famous house that was in Sex Education.
There we go.
Anderson.
That's true. That's a fun fact for Symonds Yat. Symonds Yat being the big rock, a big limestone 500 metre or foot cliff overlooking the river.
That is the Yat, yes.
Yeah. The Wye making the border between England and Wales for much of its route, but a very, very beautiful spot. But we're here today, Peter, to talk about community. So I've been very struck with how so many of our guests have said how much the people at work meant to them, and I can relate to this, how much they miss them afterwards. And I wondered whether we could perhaps explore the psychology of that a little bit more as to, what is community at work about, and how does it change when you're not working full time? And sometimes we talk about these podcasts as perhaps giving people some assistance as they contemplate retirement or they just start retirement. We also sometimes say, I think there is something to be learned from how to enjoy your working life by looking back on it, so that perhaps people in work get more out of it by recognizing, if you like, what they're going to miss when they go. So I think community is a big one. So that's what I'd like to talk about today.
Okay. A lot to talk about on community. Can I throw another Symonds Yat community story in?
Please do.
Just to ease our way into this subject. So there is a thing here at Symonds. If you've ever been to Symonds Yat, or if you decide to come to Symonds Yat, it's lovely. But it really is. It's a town. It's a place of two halves, either side of the river.
Yes.
One side has the Yat with the hill and everything else. The other one, has the beautiful woodland area and a bit more of buildings, but very attractive buildings. But I don't know how often it is. I think it's just once a year. But they have a sing-off. One side of the Yat sing at the other side, and it's competitive. But it's a community thing, isn't it? And now, obviously I did some shallow research as ever for community. And, one of the types of community is location or geography.
Yes.
So here we have a bunch of people live in one place. They've chosen to live here for various reasons. They are by default part of a community. How active they want to be or not is up to them. But there are events that bring them together, and this sing-off sounds very, very exciting.
I see what you did there. That's very clever, Peter. That's a very good link.
It's good.
I like the fact that people coming to buy a house in Symonds Yat might be interrogated as are you a tenor?
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's a matter of more how loud you are. I think it's actually it's a sing off, as opposed to a qualitative thing. I think it's a quantitative thing.
We've come over to the west side of the river, and we came across on a hand pulled ferry, didn't we?
We did.
Which I noticed. You see the plaque on the wall to the singing ferryman.
Well, we didn't have the singing ferryman because he's no longer with us. But he is another famous character locally. Would serenade. I don't know what he might have sung. I mean, would it be one cornetto or something like that? I don't know.
I think given the geography of the place, I think this is a natural crossing point. And apparently it's that ferry, a hand-pulled ferry, has been in existence since Roman times. So, we are walking in the footsteps of history, Peter, today.
Wonderful. That's very catchy. So I think I've thrown one type of community out. I don't know where you're going with this. I know you've got a list. I can see him. He's got a sheaf of papers in front of him with his research and his notes. But are we going to explore different types of community? How you want to go on this?
I'd like to perhaps, before we set off on our walk again, I'd like to perhaps discuss with you. I'd like to get your feedback about the importance of community at work. So if we talk about perhaps why do we think it's important at work, and then we can perhaps go on to, and so what happens when you leave work? What are you going to miss? So there we go. So give me some
Well, I guess it's
theories,
interesting. Well, all right, so I can reflect on my own experiences
which
because
is very non-standard, of course, but that's okay.
I don't think it's that non-standard. My communities were either wife, family, that kind of that's one. But apart from that, it has predominantly been work, and that that's an interesting experience over time because people come and go, and it's very easy to lose track of people. I think you're better than me at staying in touch with people, but
I like people, Peter. I think
you like people, and people like you. There are two fundamental differences between us. But no, I've met, and there are some people, whilst I was working with them, for them, aligned to them, whatever, it's been very, very friendly. But as soon as I've moved on, particularly in the consultative work, it's kind of you're in and out all the time. So there's a very small group of people. Even recently after my departure from my last company, I've had a couple of catch-up calls, but it's been with 2-3 people about that, and they're spread across the world, which makes it a challenging community. So it's one of the reasons we were talking in the car about my wife and I's planned move away from where we are into a more community driven environment. I think it feels it. We're going to go to a place called Tetbury, which is a Cotswolds town.
Yep.
It feels far more of a place where I can engage and create or join communities that I'm realizing I'm probably not going to have from work moving forward, because I think it feels like if I get any more work, it's going to be on an interim basis, consultative basis. You're not going to build relationships during that period of time. So yeah, that's kind of where I am.
Well, so I think you said a couple of things there which I've been mulling over. So the sort of the temporary nature of the community in which you work, you find a way of making a relationship, but it's nothing to say you have to like the people you work with, is there? It's nothing to say you have much in common other than the working environment. And so there's something there for me about structure. You're working within a guideline. You're all perhaps working towards a common goal. You have a sort of a collective engagement. So your relationship with people is constructed around the focus of the organisation, which, whilst it's not a personal construct, it means that you do have a sense of community with people that you otherwise wouldn't have had. And I think it's important. I think we're social animals, aren't we? I think we're not built to be isolated, and so we spend a lot of time with our work, and so that component of working with people, I think, is important to lots of people. And we know organisations where the culture's great and people are engaged with the culture seem to be much more happy and successful, don't they, than cultures that we've worked in that are not so positive.
No,
turnover's higher. Attrition is people leave for more money, that sort of thing. Whereas the opposite is also true. If you get people stay, they form relationships, they seem to be able to be more efficient at their work. And so there's something positive about community at work, even though it's fabricated. It's you're buying into a story, aren't you, as a community at work?
Yes, I think so. I do agree with that. Although it's just branching out into what's going on in the world at the moment with the whole of the swathe of redundancies and AI driven change and all that. That threatens that that mid to long term community build culture significantly.
I think that's why a lot of folks in our old industry are very unsettled at the moment, because I think people, as humans, I think we want to be part of something bigger. We like that collective endeavor. I think that's true for most of us. There's something about better decision making when you're in a crowd, wisdom of crowds. And so, when that logic is threatened by something as amorphous as AI, I think it's very unsettling. I think it speaks against one of the tenets of people that like working with people. One of the reasons they enjoy work. But I'm fascinated by the fact that we get pushed together at work into a structure where there's guidelines, we have contributions, we get feedback, there are rules, oversight. Communication at work tends to be thoughtful and considered. There's sort of boundaries around the way you work and behave. And obviously we all have our sort of morality and our ethos about talking to people. but it's overlaid in an organisation, isn't it, with other things. So there's a hierarchical way of doing things. There's our set piece way of doing things, thinking about town halls and regular meetings. And we some people like those, some people don't like those, but we adjust to them, don't we? And I'm going to come on later to think, actually, I think that's part of the lack of structure that people struggle with when they leave work, because they learn, they optimize. I think people optimize themselves around their communication, around a business. And I think outside of that structure, for many people, it's hard, because you don't have those set piece events. You've got to make your own wind, as it were, in terms of the way you communicate with people. You don't have a common objective. You may not have anything in common with the people around you geographically, whereas at work, that didn't matter because you had the organisation. So I think that's a thing, I think.
Can I just explore one thing there? Because, we've worked in a very hybrid style in the past. Lots of
hybrid,
lots of remote work, but lots of face-to-face. I don't know, if you reflect on your community that you perhaps are still connected to, or could have a friendly conversation with, how many of those have been predominantly remote based versus how many of those have been face-to-face engagement? Because I would say all of the people that I referred to that I have remained in conversation with have been the ones that we've sat in a room, or we've gone for a beer, or we've gone for a nice meal, or done some crazy things, entertainment wise. But it's been the real in-person connection.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think my closest relationships with the people I've sort of met face to face, broken bread with, spent time with. But I do know that after COVID, and I took on a job straight after COVID, so I didn't see my team, didn't see anyone for like a year and a half. It was the strangest thing, really. And as part of that sort of leadership role, I found myself oversharing. Beverly, my wife, used to get really, she kept saying to me, why are you going through all this personal detail? And I made a conscious commitment that, if I was going to be able to work with these people, it's important I got to know them. And so part of my role, it felt like, was to be very authentic. And so being authentic, I talk about my family. I talk about, my interests, and was very open with them. And I found that I do have good friends that I've met only once or twice because of that experience. But that's new for me. That is very new.
Perfect. Well, as we sit here with the sun coming down, this little group of ducks now, no longer ducklings, I would say, they're just swimming past.
It's very idyllic. You're making, you want to move on the noises, aren't you?
No, I'm not. I'm trying to paint a visual picture for our listeners. It's part of it. But yes, all right, we're going to move on, and we'll be back. So, since we last spoke, we've had a nice walk, hot walk. That side of the river was getting very hot towards the end, but we've come across a little kind of a meadow area. There's a youth centre that does obviously outdoor type activities.
Lovely campsite, wasn't there?
Big campsite. A family were having a nice barbecue under the barn that's been built there, or the barn building, and we've just come over a really quite spectacular bridge, which moved a lot, but was quite fun, wasn't it?
It's a suspension bridge.
Suspension bridge, that's the word.
Which actually saves us like 5 miles on our walk, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a technical term as opposed to a movie about bridge. Very good.
And we're sitting here in a little woodland area. There's been a bit of cutting going on, and I've got my bird app running, and that's a black cap we can all hear, and a chiff chaff going behind us there.
Oh, okay.
Called a chiff chaff because it makes a chiff chaff noise.
Chiff chaff. Okay, lovely. And are you going to sing the lumberjack song? Because the lumberjack song, because we're sitting on a wood pile.
No, I don't. I'll leave that be, if you don't mind.
Okay, fine.
So we were talking about community, weren't we?
We were indeed, yes.
And the importance of it. And I'm trying to sort of get to the point where I can perhaps explore what happens when you don't have it at work. And
you're trying to navigate me to where you want me to be, aren't you?
A
bit like work has been over the last 30 years.
I think we talked about the importance of it, but I think the one area we didn't really cover very much, which I think is important to a lot of people, is belonging. Belonging, that sense of belonging to a community. If you think about the world at work, I mean, it's where a lot of friendships are made. I know you said you don't have any friends from work.
Well, I got you, haven't I?
That's true. That's true.
Thank you.
So we have friendship,
Reinforcement. I appreciate
partners. You know, people meet their lifelong partners at work, don't they?
that. I do.
You know, there's all the stories. There's that. It's like a, you know, it's like a soap opera, isn't it? For people that like the gossip, you know, there's always something going on about something in the company. You've got learning, support.
Yes,
Feedback
and there's
from
periodic
people.
events as well. I was talking about face to face. We used to have that, the annual sales kickoff, which was 50% nightmare and 50% fun because you'd reconnect with people you haven't perhaps certainly hadn't seen for a year, but you know, may not have engaged with.
So it's a forced community, but it is a real community with real structure to it, and I'm sure it does when it works. It boosts well-being, I think, and mental health. I think there's something about being surrounded by people that you either like or you're engaged with or you have common ground with. And I think it's one of the problems actually with distance working at the moment. I think that sense of community at work, I think, is a sort of a sink for stress and anxiety for people. They've got people to talk to people about their worries, and you know, if they're not meeting by the apocryphal water cooler, you know, they're at home in their back bedroom working away. I think it's a concern. I think there's going to be an epidemic probably of mental health challenges associated with people being more isolated because they're not engaged with communities at work. It's my
It's
theory.
an interesting one, isn't it? Because, you know, there are a lot of people that argue the opposite in the sense that, you know, by not having the stress of having to get to work and commute and engage and work, you know, then in a certain environment, all that. But, you know, I agree. I think, you know, we've worked in that hybrid manner for so long, but I think, you know, we've always valued the face-to-face. We've always valued to get together. We've always valued the opportunity to just chill out with a few people and have some fun.
And it's where ideas come from, isn't it? It's where innovation comes from. I think my daughter, as you know, works in London, and, you know, she was telling me last night she's going to work really early to avoid the heat of the tubes today because it's going to be unbearable.
Yeah.
You can imagine on the tubes.
So,
but remember post-pandemic how people just craved contact again. So, you know, there was something there that people missed when they didn't have it. And I think that sort of leads me on perhaps to the importance of community after work.
Okay.
And how do you know, what happens when you miss all of those things? And there's a couple of elements of this for me. Obviously, there's the sort of friendship groups, or even not the close friendship groups, but the networking groups that you can fabricate. And I think perhaps it's important too. You know, we've talked in the past, haven't we, about the importance of not being isolated. They say, you know, this whole elderescence process, which we keep going back to, I think is about aging gracefully, actually, or aging happily. I think there's something about.
Let's go with happily. I'm not sure we're going to make gracefully, but
yeah.
You know.
Well, and I think part of that is about, if that's what you want and that gives you energy, finding a way to bring other people into your lives. You know,
well, I think there are kind of not forced constructs necessarily, but, you know, a lot of organisations have alumni groups. You know, I've had a couple of organisations. KPMG, for example, had one, but, you know, I was never particularly actively interested or engaged with it. So, but there is that. There's no doubt about that. And some of those obviously go back to your educational years as well. And more often than not, you know, these days, you're quite often. I mean, Mrs. T. I mean, she collects WhatsApp groups from everywhere she goes.
Yeah.
So you know, I think from all of her jobs and also other activities, she's got a series of WhatsApp groups that you know, constantly make her phone go ping.
Yeah, there's loads of ways to do it, aren't there? I keep getting reinforced about how important that is, but how difficult it is for people as well. Because, as I said before, at work you're forced together through the organisational sort of direction of travel, but when you're not in a work context, you've got to make that effort to join something or to meet people or to make a link with your community through you know, activism or contributing to something, and that takes effort.
Yeah.
And if you're not that way inclined, if you're shy or you don't like people very much, you know, there's a danger, isn't there, of actually not having that reinforcement of community. And they do say for the elderly that loneliness is the biggest epidemic sort of facing an aging population, don't they?
Yeah. Well, I can reflect on a very personal. I went to see my dad like a good son because it was Father's Day at the weekend. And I said, rather than, you know, quite often I'll just turn up with some coffee and we'd sit and chat for a couple of hours or whatever. But I said, would you like to go out? And he said, yes, I would like to go out. And we went to a coffee shop and we sat down. And it was very noisy, really noisy in there. And I said to him, are you okay here? Because it's very, very noisy. He goes, I'm happy here. It's silence is my world.
Yes.
And actually, he said, I don't want to sit here too long, I'll be honest, but
Yeah.
this is life. So I kind of enjoying it at the moment.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, and from our guests, we've heard a variety of them. We've heard from one guest who was like questioning where they went because they finished work and that was their predominant community.
Yes.
Apart from their close family. We've had other people that have talked about parallel activities they had through life, hobbies or whatever it may be. And we've had someone who's talked about things they have done or organised to do since they've retired. So
and the one that hopefully is coming up is sort of the dilemma of being more exposed to your family, where actually that's not where you want, because you don't choose your family, do you? You choose your friends, but you don't choose your family. And so there is that element of being more exposed to family. And there are lots of people listening to this, I'm sure, that don't have the strongest relationships with members of their family, and they feel out of duty, feel obliged to spend more time with them because they have time outside of work. So I think that's a difficult dynamic, which I'm looking forward to talking to our colleague about. But going back to the psychology of the fact that we're thrust together at work through a group that actually our only common interest is work, and the fact the structure of work gives us mechanisms by which we talk to people and we get talked to. I'm fascinated by the fact that we sort of optimize ourselves, I think, as busy working people around that way of working. And so when you're out of work, you don't have that structure, and I think you're very ill prepared for how do you deal with those sort of social interactions. I may be making too much of this, but not everyone finds it easy.
Not everyone's a joiner. I mean, I think there are the joiners of the world and there are the non-joiners.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm struggling with. Is like we've got a move coming up. Want to move to a much closer type village town environment where I know there's a lot going on, a lot of cafe culture, but a lot of activities. But I'm not a joiner, so it's going to be interesting to see where I go with that, because this. The thought of going, I quite like to do this and just turn up to a meeting one day.
Yeah, you're a loiterer, aren't you? I can see you sort of sitting on the fringe of lots of things until you get noticed, and then people will engage with you.
I've done PTA. I've been a governor of a school and stuff in the past. But I guess that's interesting. I think they are more work orientated type activities as opposed to I'm just going to go on to the local crochet club or the. But
you do need a hobby, Peter. You've heard me talk about this before. You need a hobby.
Yeah,
I think you need a hobby.
I don't have any hobbies.
Well, you've got one, which is making podcasts.
Okay, it's a hobby, I guess. I'll take it more seriously than that, but there we go.
Well,
I write. I mean, that's a hobby for me. I find that very relaxing.
I think you should take it more seriously than that.
What am I writing? Might write a bestseller one day. You never know.
Yeah.
But I think it is that. This is going to be interesting because I think this creation of where we're going to go to the environment. It's become very clear where I want to be, the type of community world I want to be in. But it comes back. I was talking earlier about there are geographic communities. There are, if you like, subject-based communities. Whether a knitter or a singer or something like that, that allows you to join. There are purpose-based. Whether that be for kind of charity work or something local. We're on the Y. There's a lot of communities that are supporting the, make the Y super clean and clear again and do a lot of work. So I think there are a number of ways into that sort of community, but it is taking.
You've got to want to do it, haven't you?
It's the first step in it, I suppose, and the first step is the hardest, perhaps.
Yes, I think so too. Well, why don't we, on that bombshell,
we'll move on.
Yeah.
Okay, we are at the. It tells me. I was going to say I couldn't remember the name of the pub, but it's come up on the screen here. The Saracen's Head Inn is where we have just enjoyed lunch.
Yeah.
And a very, very refreshing pint of something.
Yeah, it's almost the best bit of the walk, that, wasn't it?
It was. We've done the work, and there was the reward. I was going to reflect before we begin to wrap this subject up, because I did make some notes which I've left in my pocket up until now. But the Y tour is a very famous thing. The Y tour.
Okay.
So it actually started in Ross on Wye, which is just up the road. But there's this national craze that started in Victorian times around the kind of the Wye tour. It's 1770. That's not the Victorian times, is it? That's before that.
by about 200 years. But
The clergyman and travel writer William Gilpin took a boat trip down the River Wye and subsequently published Observations on the River Wye in 1782.
there we go.
Widely considered the UK's very first illustrated tourist guidebook.
Well, that's fantastic.
And in 1789, thanks to the French Revolution, there we go wide on this, it was no longer safe for the elite to travel into Europe, something to do with losing their heads.
Yes.
So the Wye tour was promoted as a safe alternative without the risk of losing your heads, as it says. So, and then the arrival of the Hereford, Ross and Gloucester railways in 1855 cemented its status as a bustling Victorian resort and market town, bringing prosperity and further architectural development, but also cascading down into the whole of the Wye Valley, where we are right now, where there were boat trips and there were events and gatherings, and it became a bit of a big thing in the Victorian. We finally got to the Victorian period.
No, I can see that, and I'm just so impressed with your research, Peter. I just wondered why have you started to do research all of a sudden?
Because we were originally going to go to Ross and Wye.
Oh,
Plan A was to do a walk around here. Plan B was, because of the intense heat, I suggested we just go to Ross and Wye to a pub.
I see.
Plan
So this
C
is
was where
reuse.
you hijacked me and brought me on the walk anyway, which was lovely.
You loved it. Come on,
But-
you loved it.
yeah,
It was hot, though, wasn't
Yes,
it?
but it was down here. It was down here that they did and there were a lot of sort of pleasure craft were down
Yeah.
here, and the Victorians descended on the place on the trains because they loved that.
Yeah.
And it became a bustling tourist. It still is. Even today, it is a tourist destination, effectively.
Very busy, isn't it, today? Well, not too bad, but it's
Not too busy, but definitely, I know it can get very busy at weekends.
Well, it's been nice. I like it. I like it. I think we should. I like the theme of walking alongside rivers, I have to say. But we should wrap up, I think.
We
And
should. Enough
So
already.
we've been talking about community, and we've been talking about the importance of community at work, and the consequences, perhaps, of not having a ready-made community once you stop work.
Mhm.
And we talked a little bit, didn't we, off mic, about the difference between a work community and a non-work
Yes, we were exploring
community.
that over lunch, weren't we? What can be translated, what country, what rules change effectively.
I think what I was trying to say earlier was that I think during a working life you become optimized to the social mores and the interconnections associated with your work. I know it doesn't always, not everyone likes this, but I think you do find a way of dealing with it. You deal with hierarchies, you deal with politics, you deal with friendship group, you deal with cliques. You find a way of making friends, or at least getting on with people, and sometimes you make really good friends.
Well, there's a much needed acceptance, I think, of those things. You just accept them, and therefore they're less of a
because
problem.
you have to, don't you?
Yes, you do. Yes,
But it's
Because
served
there's
up to you on a plate. A network is available.
Yes.
And of course, that is not true when you stop work.
No.
And so if you're not a joiner, I think there's the dilemma about either you decide you're going to withdraw, which for all the reasons we've talked about, I don't think is a good idea, because I think we are social animals in the main. And so how do you stay engaged? Where do you get your sense of community from? We talked about the fact that obviously family, you don't choose your family, and that's not always positive for everybody. And then it's your friends. And so
Well, the family are fine in small doses. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, of course. And I think most people get a lot of pleasure from their families. So I'm just acknowledging the fact we're all different, and some families are challenging for some people. But so friendship groups are important, and outside of work, friendship groups, I think you have to work at it, don't you? You've got to get out and about. I think be active. Get involved in the community. Find ways in which you can bring your own particular penchant, passions, your capabilities. If you're a lurker, you sit on the edge of the queue.
Yeah, lurker. I hope I've just and there is a pleasure craft going past right now.
Yeah,
There's
they
a boat
look
full
as
of
though they're
people.
having pleasure on it as
They
well.
do. Yeah, it's very pleasurable pleasure. I'm on a course at the moment to become a fully qualified hermit.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is my new hobby.
Is there anyone else on that course?
Hermitage? No, it's a very private course.
Oh,
There's not even a lecturer.
Are you taking it in a cave?
Yeah, somewhere off the Welsh coast. No, it's something I personally, and I'm sure a lot of people have to do. It's like, you're right. You don't want to be isolated. You don't want to not have a life. You do not have sociability or interaction. Therefore, it is a matter of getting up and trying things. I think people say that, you just try things. Join a society and leave a society if you don't like it. And see how that goes. And so that certainly is my intention. And
Well,
who knows? In a year's time,
I do feel
may become a very sociable person. Who
I
knows?
do feel responsibility here as your only friend, actually. I feel that I need
You'd
to.
be a burden, you mean?
Well,
You'd
can I
like more
delegate
time.
this?
You'd like more time to yourself. You're also nervous about the fact that I constantly attempt to move nearer and nearer to you.
It's getting closer, isn't it?
Tetbury to where you live, is that not too far, is it? That's got to be nearer than where I am at the moment.
It is.
Okay.
Near, yeah. No, it'd be great.
Tell Beverly not to worry.
It'd be great. Okay, so I think we've agreed. Community is a good thing.
Yes.
You get a lot of it for free at work, and you've got to work at it outside of work. But to ignore it, you ignore it at your peril. There's a loneliness pandemic out there for the older generation, which we're not part yet because we're in elderescence.
Yes.
But I think there's something to do about the quality of life as you outside of work, which involves people, whoever you are, and that needs effort, I think.
Yep. There we go.
So should we leave it there?
Well, you've said elderescence twice. Would you like to say it one more time for the hat trick?
Well, the book title, Elderescence, The Making of an Elder, is out there, and just need to write it now.
Okay, we're off.
Thanks, Peter.
Bye.
You have been listening to Walking into Retirement, an unusual podcast about finding purpose, meaning and balance after a busy working life with David Ailing Smith and Peter Taylor. Find out more at www.walkingintoretirement.com, and why not share your own retirement stories with the hosts?